Good evening. Tonight I want to talk about a concept and a phrase that people often repeat, but I want to flesh it out a little bit more. So a lot of times people talk about weapons being an extension to the body. So I have some notes on this and I have some thoughts that I've got written down. So let's pan over here and take a look about that. So yes, weapons should be an extension of the body, but what does that mean? How does that work? Because a lot of times when I see people talking about using weapons as an extension of the body, it's not apparent what they mean by that. So we start off with, well, there's an extension of range, right? Your weapon is a little bit longer than the reach of your arm or your leg, so that sort of makes perfect sense. How we connect the extension of the range to our technique and how we use the core of our body to generate power is worthy of discussion. We'll take a look at that here in just a second. The next is an addition of mass, right? So if I'm holding a heavy piece of metal, such as a sai or a techo, or a sword or anything like that, that's going to add mass. Mass, of course, is part of the formula for developing force. So that's going to give us an advantage in the amount of force that we can create. So that's also extending the capabilities of the body. Next is the concentration of force as a function of the shape. So when we take a look, for example, let me pull the sai out. Because when I hit with the sai, if I hit with my hand, then it's usually the first two knuckles that impact. When I use the sai, now it's going to be on the point of the sai. So that's a smaller surface area. If I end up doing some kind of a nukte with the sai here, then it's an even smaller area. So you think about the tip of a sword, if you're stabbing with a sword or with a bow, if I end up doing a ski with the bow, then the force is on a smaller surface area. So this is pretty obvious and makes sense, just prima facie. When we talk about the function of a shape, right? We've shown an example of poking, we've talked about thrusting with a sword. Some weapons, the shape of the sword is almost like a cleaver, so it's almost like a hacking. When you talk about a katana has a specific shape that comes to it where the back is curved because of how they're forged. That generates a cutting motion. So whenever you see somebody who's working with a katana, they're not hacking with the edge, they're pulling the edge through because of the shape. The same thing with a scimitar. A scimitar was especially designed for people that were cutting down from on top horseback. So the shape of the weapon lends itself to certain movements with the weapons, which lends itself as an extension of the body for certain techniques and factors of movement. This creates a certain mechanical advantage, and it's not just pushing the weapon around. So I want to give an example of what I don't think it is, right? So if I'm going to try to hit with this and I just push. Even if I push with a certain amount of physicality, that's not the same as if I pull. And when I pull and it comes out, if I don't have a chair in the way, if I pull when it comes out, that's more power than just pushing. So if you see people talking about it's an extension of the body and they're moving like this, I don't think they quite get what they're preaching. When it moves like this and it's moving through the core of the body, to generate extra power, then that's a bit different than just pushing the weapon around. So when we talk about the extension, it's an extension from the core, not just the arms moving through, but a movement with the whole body. So I've got some diagrams here, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to think about the weapon as a fulcrum, right? So a first class lever, we've got the effort on one end of the fulcrum, we've got the load on the other, right? Second class lever, we got the effort here, we've got the fulcrum on the end, we got the load in between the fulcrum and the effort. And a third class lever, we got the fulcrum with the effort in the middle and the load on the end. So I'd like to demonstrate a couple of first class lever examples in Kobudo. So Suresh, we can have you come over here. So lever, right? Here is the fulcrum. There is the load, right? So we can come around and see this. Here is the effort, right? So if I bring my fulcrum down, touch with the load, and I use that as a mechanical advantage, then I get a certain amount of movement. Let's come around this way so we can see that. if I just try to push through, and I'm using this arm with no real mechanical advantage, let's come this way just a bit, right? Try not to let me move your weapon. It may move a little bit, but that's about all I get. So right now I'm using this arm to try to push through here. Even if I load up and use my body and try to do it, even if I get a little bit of a turn and move it, I don't get as much movement as if I use my opposite hand and I use this to pull up. And that creates a mechanical advantage here. So that's how we look at it here. Let me get a little bit more to work with here. Slide it down, slide it down. Okay, so when I come here, then I get a little bit of movement. So this is the lever arm that I'm talking about. Here then becomes the fulcrum. That's where it comes in. The extension, where the power comes, is this shifting of the body here. If I just try to push, it doesn't tend to work. So in Kobudo, we rarely ever think about the pushing hand. We just use it to close the area. The power comes from the pulling hand. Then the nukite comes in. When we think about it with the sai, it's a similar type of a setup where the thumb becomes the fulcrum, here becomes the force, and then the contact is there. So Suresh, if I can use you just with the target there. So if I'm trying to strike this way, right? Again, if I just try to push with the weapon, yes, I've got the extra mass. Yes, it's hard. It's made out of iron. Yes, that would hurt more than just that. But I'm not getting any real mechanical advantage other than just the mass of the weapon. If instead I connect this with the core and I snap through the core and make this an extension using the fulcrum, then the amount of force that I get is a whole lot more. The next is a second class lever, and I don't have either of these here, but if you think about if I were to have a tonfa here, and this is the fulcrum and the load is down there, then this way, or like here is in hamahiga no tonfa, or with a kama, trying to cut with a kama. So the load is here, the fulcrum is here, and the energy is in between. And then finally, a third class lever, again where we've got the fulcrum is here, and I'm moving with the force this way, and the load is there. Just give me this as a target. We're probably going to need to back up a little bit for this, okay? So when I come this way, I'm going to need a little bit more space. When I come up here, I'm actually bringing this back, and then this comes in. So this kind of a shoal energy pulling down this way, and this coming out, you've got it here. In actuality, it starts off as a first class lever, because here now is the fulcrum. That gets it there, but at the very end, once it connects with the body, there is a little bit of this motion coming in where I connect through the center and I come in this way. So that's what I meant by the third class lever on that. Those were the topics I wanted to say. So just to refresh, when you want to talk about the weapon being an extension, yes, range, mass. I've actually got a little bit of a Venn diagram drawn here. We have mass, range, or extension, the shape of the weapon, and mechanical advantage are all things that you should think about with some overlapping impact on each other. So don't just push the weapon away from your body and think that you're getting the extension for a mechanical advantage. It has to work with the core of the body. You need to be aware of where the balance points are, what your range is, what effect that may have on how the weapon moves, and how that affects your opponent. That's what I wanted to cover. Thanks.